Okay, real quick here. This is, what is this? The Guardian? Yeah, The Guardian from the UK. The headline here, disturbing weed killer ingredients tied to cancer found in 80% of U.S. urine samples, which I thought this was already disturbing. Yeah, it is disturbing, but I thought we already knew this. But I think
they're talking about glyphosate.
Yeah,
and we have known this. And another example of what was crazy, fringy conspiracy theories, and all those crazy people on the internet talking about Roundup, being a dangerous chemical in pretty much all of our food, a forever chemical. But this one's interesting because it does include the CDC. This is a step forward.
It says here, more than 80% of urine samples drawn from children and adults in the U.S. health study contained a weed-killing chemical linked to cancer, a finding scientists have called disturbing and concerning. The report by a unit... Yeah, and this is crazy. The report by a unit of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC, found that out of 2,310 urine samples taken from a group of Americans intended to be representative of the U.S. population, 1,885 were laced with detectable traces of I have a hard time saying this word for some reason. Glyphosate. This is the active ingredient in herbicides sold around the world, including the widely used Roundup brand. Almost a third of the participants were children ranging from 6 to 18. Wow. Academics and private researchers have been noting high levels of the herbicide glyphosate in analyses of human urine samples for years. But the CDC...
I want to point something out. I want to point something out real quick. Academics and private researchers. This private researchers is a key term because part of the glyphosate problem, yes, exactly. Private researchers are a couple of things. They are conspiracy theorists on the internet, and they are rogue scientists who work outside of the scientific establishment because of Monsanto and Bayer's brutal legal campaigns and corruption within the scientific establishment. Mixed up in the whole vaccine conversation is the corruption within the scientific community and the way that it's set up and how it incentivizes, not real science. It incentivizes working with companies that stand to benefit from certain hypotheses being proven or disproven, which is not science. It's a horrible corruption of humans trying to figure out the world. But it's the private researchers who have been threatened, who have been sued, who have been driven into the ground trying to talk about Monsanto and glyphosate and how they're actively killing us for the sake of an easy weed killer. And agriculture. Private researchers have been noting high levels of the herbicide glyphosate in analysis of human urine samples for years.
And I think that's the big takeaway here is this next sentence here, which makes a whole lot of sense coming out of 2 years of just completely destroying public trust. Which is the CDC. So it says, the academics and private researchers have been noting high levels of herbicide glyphosate in analyses of human urine samples for years, but the CDC has only recently started examining the extent of human exposure to glyphosate in the U.S., and its work comes at a time of mounting concerns and controversy over how pesticides in food and water impact human and environmental health. Oh, it's just recently started coming. They notice now they have to tap into the topics that conspiracy theorists have been sounding the alarm for a long time,
right?
To probably stay alive, to keep their funding coming in. Quote, I expect that the realization that most of us have glyphosate in our urine will be disturbing to many people, said Leanne Shepard, professor at the University of Washington's Department of Environmental and Occupational Health Science. Thanks to the new research, quote, we know that a large fraction of the population has it in urine. Many people will be thinking about whether that includes them. Shepard co-authored a 2019 analysis that found glyphosate exposure increases the risk of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and also co-authored a 2019 scientific paper that reviewed 19 studies documenting glyphosate in human urine. Both the amount and prevalence of glyphosate found in human urine has been rising steadily since the 1990s, when Monsanto Co. introduced genetically engineered crops designed to be sprayed directly with Roundup, according to research published in 2017 by University of California, San Diego School of Medicine researchers. Oh my gosh, there's so much evidence from like actual established universities. The CDC is now coming around to it.
Yeah.
Paul Mills, the lead researcher of that study, said that at the time, there was, quote, an urgent need for a thorough examination of the impact on human health from glyphosate in foods people commonly consume. And it just kind of goes on and on and on here. Now, there's this real quick. I have a couple highlights. They're at odds with many researchers and International Agency for Research on Cancer, a unit of the World Health Organization, which classified glyphosate as a probable human carcinogen in 2015.
Yeah.
The World Health Organization actually in 2015 was in agreement. The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, has taken the opposite stance, classifying glyphosate as not likely to be carcinogenic. But last month, a federal appeals court issued an opinion vacating the agency's safety determination and ordering the agency to give, quote, further consideration to evidence of glyphosate risks. Quote, people of all ages should be concerned, but I'm particularly concerned for children, said Phil Landrigan, who worked for years at the CDC and the EPA and now directs the Program for Global Public Health and Common Good at Boston College.
Yeah.
So basically, the EPA agrees with the Monsantos of the world.
Right. So yes, and that's. Do you have the SCOTUS jingle?
Oh,
can we find that? We should play a little SCOTUS jingle so we can give a little breakdown of what's going on. And why the CDC might be changing their tune on this.
Supreme Court, SCOTUS.
Nice. Okay. So we've been tracking a lot of the drama with the Supreme Court, obviously getting a lot of attention. One of the most recent decisions was to take away the administrative power of the EPA. And not just the EPA, but set precedent to take away administrative power of non-elected agencies in mandating and controlling policy.
Right.
Now, this relates to a deeper breakdown I want to do someday on what's called the administrative state. And the we talk about the police state, the military industrial state, the security state, the this, the that, right? There's also another thing called the administrative state. And this started quickly after World War II. And this is when a lot of these non-elected agencies, EPA, CDC, NIH, FDA, FCC, FAA, these types of things. These are called non-elected administrative agencies. And this was the reason they came about was because, we get these agencies and they can make decisions for us. We don't need to have elections and, bother with all this democracy stuff. You talk about this idea of democracy dying. Democracy died in the mid-20th century when most of the rules of our country are not made by policy lawmakers in elected positions. They're made by career bureaucrats who work in these places like the EPA. Now, this the Supreme Court just ruled to take away or ruled unconstitutional the EPA's ability to make these sort of policy decisions. And this affects not just the EPA, which, just set a fire on Twitter because that means, SCOTUS loves climate change and the EPA is such a noble institution and et cetera. Well, like you mentioned, EPA made a non-elected administrative state policy decision finding that listing that glyphosate is non-cancerous, which has allowed glyphosate to be used in all of our food products, all of them.
Yeah.
And now that SCOTUS has sort of ruled unconstitutional decisions like this, it was this administrative state of the EPA that you can argue has had rippling effects through the health of 80% of us, according to this recent study. 80% of us have cancer-causing agents in our blood, not for nothing, but, for the profit of big evil corporations, supported by the EPA, a non-elected, corrupt organization. We saw the same thing with the FDA. You don't even have to get into the vaccinations to talk about it, although that's obvious and has been documented here and other places quite considerably. But all, the FDA corruption was the center, the focal point of the opioid epidemic, and the millions of lives that the opioid lies by the pharmaceutical companies, supported by the FDA, an administrative agency. So SCOTUS, taking away the power from the EPA just a couple weeks ago, finally gives a little bit of hope. For people who are tired of being ruled over by an undemocratic process, but also has stricken fear into the hearts of the CDC, who is already on the rocks, and it has become apparent that they're going to lose some of their policy-making power. And like you said, Guns, they're having to rebuild trust with the population because we don't trust them. We don't want them making policy. They've made bad policy, and which is supported by all sorts of their own scientists. Rochelle Walensky literally ignoring her council, her vaccine council, who said, I don't know about these child booster things. And she said, thank you very much. I won't be needing your services anymore. And then announced that child boosters are awesome. So go get them. So stuff like that. So this SCOTUS decision, while the focus is so much on Roe v. Wade and how they're a theocracy and how we need to pack the courts and destroy the Supreme Court and things like this, when you get into conversations with your gritter friends, your normies, you can remind them that the corruption of the EPA is what has destroyed our agriculture, trust in our agricultural, policymakers, because they were corrupt and allowed an obviously poisonous substance to be put into all of our food. And the SCOTUS, the supermajority conservative SCOTUS, are literally saving future generations from pesticide-caused cancers, which is just a fun little detail. Life is complicated. Reality is complicated. Politics are complicated. But this is a nice thing to bring up.
Yeah, and just to kind of wrap up the story, the CDC... The new CDC data was released as part of the National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey, NANES, research that is typically highly valued by scientists. So, I think they're trying to jump on the right side of history when it comes to topic like this to maybe save as much face as possible. So, it is very interesting to see. We'll just continue to watch how this develops. But it's not a good sign for the organizations like the EPA and CDC, which will probably remain, but maybe not have the same kind of influence over what happens to the rest of us.
Yeah, I mean, literal dictator type power, unelected dictator type power. And that's why, you read the headline, CDC says 80% of Americans have glyphosate in their body. It's kind of like, duh. Where have you been?
We've been doused in this thing for 30, 40, like a generation. So of course.
But the real story is, the EPA is losing power. The
CDC, we better do something.
Yeah, the scales of power in the administrative state are shifting, and so people are making moves.